Hello my fellow storytellers. In this tutorial, I'll be showing you how to use Blender 2.92 to create a procedurally generated floor texture. Now I know that Blender 2.92 is a little bit on the older side now, but the process of creating your textures should be the same in the most recent version of Blender. Now, to begin our tutorial, we are going to first delete the default cube. And the reason why we are doing that is because if you wish to bake your texture, you want it to be on a flat plane, or else it will unfold the shape when you are baking it. So, first off, you're going to add a plane. So now we have our plane here. Then you are going to go to Shading. In the Shading tab, you will press New, and then you'll get your principled BSDF. Now, what we are going to input into this principled BSDF is a mix RGB. Shift A is the short key to add, but if you wish to do it manually using your mouse, click the Add button up here and press Search. So, in this mix RGB, we have three sections: the FAC, the color, and the color 2. The FAC, think of it as where Blender is drawing out where it's going to color. And the color 1 and color 2 are the two colors that it is going to draw out and put on your object. So what you're going to do is that you're going to plug in this mix RGB into the principled BSDF. Let's move over here. Now, for this tutorial, we are going to be making a wooden floor. Press Shift A or the Add tab and search for brick texture. Now, with our brick texture, if you have the Node Wrangler add-on activated, do Control T and you will get all of this set up for you. However, if you do not have it activated, use the Add button and search for Texture Coordinate and Mapping, and it will give you the same result. Oops. Let me do this again. Control T. And set it up like you see it right here. So, second, we are going to add the color ramp. We are then going to set our color ramp to constant. And the reason for this is so that it does not fade in between the bricks that are going to appear in just a minute. You're going to put the color into the FAC of the color ramp and the output of the color ramp into the FAC of the mix RGB. Second, you are going to make one of your colors of the mix RGB black. And now you see that our plane has a brick texture, a very simple brick texture, but a brick texture at that. Now what you're going to do for the brick texture is that you are going to make this color, that's if it lets me select it, this color white. Now, as you can see, you have all of your bricks all nice and neat. Now, what you do is that you scale everything up to it gets to the point where you like it. And then you set your mortar size to 0.005. Well, let's go 0.001 for that. That looks like good ridges for a wood floor. Then you're going to do for the brick width is that you're going to increase the width slightly, and then you're going to decrease the row height. And there we go. That looks a little bit like wood paneling in an older house, doesn't it? Well, it needs the grain in the middle now. It needs the grain on the actual planks. So the way we're going to add our grain is that, see how the FAC has mapped all of the black and white colors onto your plane. This is important because where the black is painted is where your grain texture is going to go, or where the white is painted is where the green texture is going to go. Whatever you input into the place where it is black, and whatever the place input into the place that is white is where it will be painted onto. So say you put a green texture into this black section right here. It will paint the green texture onto the grooves where the planks connect to each other. And say you put a red texture into the white input, then the red will appear on all the planks. So let me demonstrate that. So we're going to search for a noise texture. And what we're going to do is that we are going to duplicate our color ramp and put the color into the FAC of the color ramp. Control T for node wrangler to add those nodes, and we're going to put our noise texture into color 2. Now, there's a problem here. We can't just input it into color 2. And the reason for that is because we need to be able to change the color of our noise texture so that we could have a wooden floor. It's not just a black and white floor. So the way to do that is that we are going to add another mix RGB node. And you instead plug the color ramp into the FAC of that mix RGB node. And then output that mix RGB node to the white slot of your the main mix RGB node. Excuse me. So what we're going to do is that we are going to adjust this slider to the way we want. And the more you move one side of the slider away from the other side, the more that color is going to take over, or it's going to be mapped onto your plane here. So what we're going to do is that we're going to adjust the noise texture. So let's scale that down a little bit, increase the roughness, and increase the detail. Scale that a little bit further, and increase the amount of dirt we have on our wooden floor. That's a very dusty wooden floor. So now that our noise texture is there, we now have a very, very dusty wooden floor. But what about the green? Well, that's where it gets interesting. We are going to Shift A again and look for a wave texture. Do Control T for node wrangler, duplicate your color ramp, and output the color of your wave texture into the FAC of your color ramp. And then get another mix RGB node and put your color into the FAC, your color of your color ramp into the FAC of that mix RGB node. And output that mix RGB node to the white of the white input of the second mix RGB node. Now, as you can see, the wave texture is not aligned with the brick texture. So what we have to do is that we have to re-angle this. So what we do is that we change X to Y. Now it's aligned with our brick texture. We adjust our color ramp, and then we scale down our wave texture. We add a little distortion. We add a little, oh, I almost forgot. Change, depending on your preference, you could change your wave texture to rings or bands. Bands look like this and give you more of that, well, rustic looking grain, and bands give you more of a uniform grain. So what we're going to do is that we're going to switch it to rings, and then for the scale of on our mapping coordinate, we are just going to squish this down to the point at which it looks like a whole bunch of waveforms. And we're just going to do that. And for a better looking texture, we're going to just switch that back to bands. So now we have mapped the scale of what our wood grain is going to look like. Now we're going to add a little bit more detail, some detail roughness, and some more detail scale, some phase offset, some distortion. Let's zoom in here so that we can take a look at it. Let's lower that distortion a little bit. Add a little bit of that phase offset. Play with our color ramp. Alright, there we go. Now, to get a spiraling grain that we're going to we're going to get a new wave texture and place it underneath. And we're going to leave it on X this time. Control T, copy your color ramp, excuse me, duplicate your mix RGB, and we are going to put the color output of our color ramp into the mix RGB, and then the output of our mix RGB into the white input of our third mix RGB node. Now, as you can see, we get the black bars again. Whoops! Did not mean to do that. Alright, we get our black bars again. Adjust your color ramp to the way you want it to look. Adjust your scale on your mapping and rotation to the way you wish for it to look. I'm going to have it be diagonal. I'm going to adjust the scale so that, this may look a little weird, but then we're going to add our distortion, a little bit more distortion, our detail roughness, and our detail scale. Then add a little bit more detail. And there we go. You have a wood-looking texture, but it's all black and white. How do you add a little bit color to it? That's where that's where the mix RGB nodes come in. Now, wherever this is mapped, it is going to change the color of your floor. So what we're going to do is that we are going to go all the way down to our fourth mix RGB node. And we are going to change the color to whatever we wish. Since this is a wood floor, we're going to go for a little bit of a darker color. Then we're going to increase that, add a little bit of a brown grain, close to black. And then for our third mix RGB node, we're going to add a little bit of a darker grain. There we go. And then for our noise texture node, which is our second mix RGB node, we're going to make it look a little bit dirty, like dust, like some dirt got into the house. Then for our for the middle of our planks, we're going to add a dark brown. Now, our texture looks very flat. There isn't any depth in it. So, a way to add depth to our texture is that we create a normal map. Now, we could create an entire separate system of nodes to create our normal map. However, we could create it using the same texture nodes that we have here, but just a little bit of a different system. So what you're going to do is that you are going to search for a bump map. You're going to put in the normal input of your principal BSDF your bump map. Next, you are going to duplicate your color ramp again for every single. You're going to duplicate a color ramp for every single procedural texture you have. By procedural texture, I mean your brick, noise, wave, and wave texture. And then what you're going to do is that you're going to search for a mix RGB. You're going to input your brick texture into your mix RGB. You're going to input your brick texture into your color ramp and then into your bump map mix RGB. Second, you are going to put your mix RGB into the height. Now, it looks like there's nothing changed, but if you follow the same steps up here and change this to dark, whoa, our wood looks like it has grain. It looks like our wood flooring looks like it has an actual grain to it. Well, yeah, it looks like it looks 3D. So, second, we are going to duplicate that mix RGB and do the same process that we did for every other color node that we have here. You're going to plug that in to this color ramp, and then plug that in to this FAC, and then plug this in to the white. And then let it load, and then look, our dust has texture. So then we are going to add another mix RGB and then do the same thing that we've been doing. Let me move these back a little bit. And then put that into the FAC. Put that in like that. Duplicate. I'll fix this in just a second. Put that into the FAC. And then put this into that. Wait for it to load. And there. Then adjust your bump map accordingly. Adjust your bump map accordingly. Add a little bit more dust there. Then let's see what it looks like in cycles. Oh, remember to change your rendering from EV to cycles. And if you have a GPU, set it to GPU. And then for denoising, click both of those things. Now let's take a look at what it looks like in cycles. And then there's our wood floor in cycles. Now let me drag the light over here. Where's our light? Ah, there's our light. drag our light to our wood floor so that we can see what it looks like. Let's lower that a little bit. Oops. Now, you're probably wondering, hey, the wood floor is too reflective. And that it is too reflective. So the next thing that we're going to do, a simple thing that you can do to easily get a reflection or roughness map or glossiness map for your floor is that you plug in your the mix RGB that goes into the height of your bump map into the roughness. And then there we go. There's our wood floor. Let's adjust the color real quick. So let's make this a little bit darker. Let's change the color of that grain. Oops, wrong one. Change the color of that grain. And then change the color of these spaces in between. There we go. And there you have it. There's our wood floor. However, as you can see, it is perfectly reflecting our light. So I showed you an easy way to do it, to put your reflection map on it. But now let's do the little bit more difficulty way, but a little bit more realistic way. So we're going to duplicate this mix RGB node, plug it into the FAC, and then plug it into the roughness. And then for extra information, you can preview what your mix RGB node looks like. So what we're going to do, and a good note, let me switch this back to the principal BSDF. If you change this to white, the less reflective it is. If you change this to black, the more reflective it is. So we have our mix RGB for our texture. What we're going to do is that we are going to create another array of nodes that controls our roughness. Whoops. Let's move this all down here. So what you can do is that let's disconnect this, duplicate that, duplicate this, and duplicate this. And the more mixed RGB nodes, the more control you will have over how rough something is in your texture. So you are going to plug this in, plug this in to here, to the, whoops, wrong one. You're going to plug this into the FAC, plug this into the FAC, and plug this into the FAC. Let's organize our nodes a little bit so it doesn't look so much like a mess. Let's move this down here. Move that over here. Move that over here. Move that right here. So now that we have the nodes that control our roughness, we are going to adjust how reflective the elements on our floor are going to be. Let's lower our light source to 50 watts. And we don't want that dust to be super reflective, so we're going to make that white. And now that dust is no longer reflective. And for our grain, we are going to add a little bit more darkness to that. Oops, sorry about that. Add a little bit more darkness to that. And a little bit more darkness for our ridges. Then let's adjust our color ramps over here to fit our liking. Let's go back to the shading viewport. Take a look at our texture here. Adjust your color ramps as needed. And let's go back to our rendered view. Adjust our color ramps as needed. Let's make this a little bit more, a little bit more. There we go. Just that. Ooh, there we go. That's what we want. That detail. There we go. Now, if you move the light around, you can see that there's all of the reflections that you want. Now that is how to make a simple wood texture in Blender. Thank you guys, and have a nice day. And see you at the next tutorial.